No need to speculate any longer about what's going on in Cleveland here on Locked On NFL because we're joined by Spencer German from Locked On Browns, and he's going to give us all the tea. Hang out with us.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
There's no doubt about that. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Barbershop edition of Locked On NFL. That is the afternoon version. And we're here to run down some of the top stories from around the National Football League. Even if we got to create them and make them up, that's what we're going to do. All right. So make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast each and every day, because it is your team every day, and we are very, very grateful for you making us your first listen. Whether you watch or listen, we will be available to you. Here's what we're going to talk about. By we, I'm talking about Spencer German. Y'all know Spencer German, but he's never actually been on the show live, but we have used the clips from the Browns, who have been some of the biggest newsmakers this offseason. So we're going to get his opinion on Travis Hunter in the third segment, and we're going to talk about maybe the Saints are the only team that can rival the purgatory stance at the quarterback position that Cleveland has right now. We'll get his opinion on that. Right smack in the middle, the Steelers and the Bengals, the two teams that are jockeying with Cleveland to catch Baltimore, who we're going to talk about in the first segment. But we'd be remiss if we just skipped over this stuff, because we've been talking about the Browns this entire time. I'm just going to get to Spencer and introduce Spencer German to the Locked On NFL people, to the barbershop, and let him let us know, is this mess in Cleveland as big as it appears?
I don't know if it's as big as it appears. Like, I think the Browns have sort of like a strategic plan in terms of back of their minds of how this all kind of goes. And I think their thought process going into this year is, hey, let's kind of bridge the gap here. Like, let's try to be competitive this year. Because let's face it, like, they could have pivoted to the alternative, which is let's just tank and focus on finding our quarterback and all that. And I think the number one sign that they weren't willing to do that is they signed Myles Garrett, right? We all remember the stink Myles Garrett made in the offseason. Said the Browns were in the right place for him in terms of trying to win now and chase Super Bowls, wanted to go play with a great quarterback. The fact that they re-signed him and brought him back tells us everything we need to know about what they're trying to accomplish here, which I think is thread that needle on win now and then, find their franchise quarterback or rebuild sort of on the fly. And you got a draft class this year that I think they're really excited about. There's at least 3, if not 4, depending on what happens to Quinshon Judkins, guys that are going to make an immediate impact on this team, start immediately and have to sort of be thrown to the fire here. And I think they're kind of banking on that happening. So, like, I understand from the outside looking in, and especially as long as Deshaun Watson is part of this franchise and this organization, everyone's going to say the Browns are a mess. They're a circus. They don't know what they're doing. I think, and listen, when you win 3 games, you just got to kind of wear that. You got to live with that. I get it. You know how that goes down in Jacksonville, Tony.
Hey, man, don't throw us into your mess. Don't be throwing us into your mess. We'll do that later on. I don't want to hear that foolishness. Y'all, hey, we might got a little dirt on it. Y'all wallow in mud up there, though, man. So, no, really no. But all of that stuff is a great point. And the things you say, I do understand what it feels like. Murphy's Law is just a cloud hanging over your franchise. Let me ask you this before we move a little bit further. We talked about Deshaun Watson. Jimmy Haslam yesterday. Now, he's been in a little bit of news, too, in the past about some things that have happened with him. I just don't understand what is the blue sky, or what do you actually gain other than saving your reputation for signing Deshaun Watson to a fully guaranteed deal? What do you gain by blaming everything on the GM about picking this kid, Shedeur Sanders? Why would you even do that? Because what that does is it signals that there's not alignment, regardless of your stance this year and how you're trying to build for the future with draft picks. You don't have alignment with your general manager when you say, that wasn't my pick, that's on him. I don't like people that point fingers and blame folks.
Yeah, so what's interesting about this, Tony, and I think there's been some this is a story or a headline to me that very much has like a national narrative and it has like a local narrative to it. Because I think us in the media who were at that press conference, when we heard him say that, like there was a lot of talk after the draft that Jimmy Haslam basically forced Andrew Berry to make the Shedeur Sanders pick.
Gotcha.
That was where that question came from. Was everyone was convinced that this was Jimmy Haslam swooping in and telling him he has to take him, and especially because they'd already taken a quarterback in the draft. And so the reason it was even asked was, hey, was this you? Did you do this? And so he was basically responding to, no, like I let my guys do their thing. I let my guys work. He was trying to clarify that point more so than blame somebody. And so I think I saw like First Take was talking about this exact same thing. And they had the same thought like you did. And I understand where it comes from, but I definitely didn't take it that way. I know it's going to sound like I'm like defending the Browns here. I get that, but I kid you not, like that was a big talking point here locally was, did Jimmy Haslam make them make this pick? And part of the reason it was the storyline, by the way, is because after the Shedeur pick was in, you know how they flash at the draft to like that in the war room camera that they had?
Yeah.
Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski just had like these very like straight faces. They looked very serious. So everyone assumed like, oh, they didn't make this pick. And so that's what he was kind of getting out in front of there. It wasn't so much a pointing the finger, blame game. We're not on the same page. It was more of a, listen, I let my staff do their thing. I let my guys pick their players. I wasn't interfering in this instance. And Jimmy Haslam does have a history of doing that in the past. So I think he was just trying to kind of clarify that.
See, and I'm used to local narratives being correct. That's why Locked On, this network is so important, because the local experts, they can break it down and give it to you. And this is why I went straight to Spencer with no clips today, because I wanted to get that out of there. But those boys, Stefanski and Barry did look up like they had a family function going on, and the uncle that always puts raisins in the potato salad walked in, and they like, who the hell invited him? We ain't eating that crap.
No raisins in the potato salad.
I'm telling you, man, you can't be putting raisins in potato salad. I tell you what, when you're down low, though, you're always looking up high. And right now in the AFC North, we're going to take a look at the three teams. The first one, we're going to look at Baltimore. My man Kevin Oestreicher for the Ravens was talking about something yesterday that's extremely important, but they lost their tight end. And I thought that, well, at least for a while, I thought with Mark Andrews dropping those balls last year that they would start going over to Isiah Likely. I want you to hear Kevin Oestreicher talk about the possibilities of Likely being out for a minute.
We have officially gotten word on Isiah Likely's injury from Tuesday at practice. I'm Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. On Wednesday at about 7:40 a.m., Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reported that Isiah Likely suffered a small fracture in his foot. At practice on Tuesday, he was in visible pain. He went down after a one-on-one rep. He was pounding the ground, was carted off, limped into the locker room. So diagnosis officially a small fracture in his foot. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network then added on that Likely will have surgery this week, and the expectation and belief is that the timeline to return will be right around 6 weeks now.
That's not what you want to hear in training camp. I hate even mentioning the I word in training camp, but Baltimore has a lot of depth. But still, if you're going to make a run at them, you need every little thing to go your way if you're one of the ops.
Yeah, listen, I think this is one small blow. I wouldn't say, I think maybe small is the wrong word. It is a substantial, notable blow to a Ravens team that is very deep, very talented. I'm not going to sit here and say that like this derails all their plans or like cancel the Super Bowl parade if you're a Ravens fan who's planning on being at that. But certainly, levels the playing field a little bit with the rest of this division. I still think that the Ravens in general have a talent. They have a surplus of talent that the other teams in this division just don't on both sides of the football. They should still be considered the favorites in this division. But the one thing that's interesting about the AFC North, as always, is the fact that you just never know. Like these teams always play each other tight. They're always really competitive games. They always, you get these press conferences after these two teams play, and there's always somebody talking about AFC North football as this physical different game. Like last year, the Ravens were a juggernaut, and somehow the Browns beat them. So it's a weird thing in this division. You never know. I would still say though, yes, to your point, like the Ravens are still the team that everybody else is chasing. And we'll see what the Isiah Likely injury means for their offense. But I have to believe that they'll be able to navigate it because they have just too much talent. And Lamar Jackson is such an eraser when it comes to mistakes or injuries or those types of things because he's just so damn good.
Yep. And so are the other teams in the AFC North. And while we have Spencer here today, we're actually going to take the segment after this one and talk about the Bengals, or the Bungles, if you will, and the Pittsburgh Steelers and their uncharacteristically busy free agency period. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Listen to me, man. It is time to fuel up and turn up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold, grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot, whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends on the golf course. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest. Some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. The wildest thing I've ever seen on a golf course was a dude hit a hole-in-one who had never even reached the green before. He probably had 5 Hour Energy that day. It's all about good times when you hang with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the beverage cart. Here's what you need to do. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. Now, this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code not good. It is not good for subscription orders. Get your 5 Hour Energy today. Here with Spencer German on Locked On NFL in the barbershop, hanging out with Tony Wiggins. Like I said, you guys know Spencer very, very well. I know him well, too, but this is the first time he's actually come in the barbershop for a little bit of a trim, and we're going to make sure we eat all the meat off this bone, man, to make sure we don't let him out of the door before he satisfies our thirst about the AFC North. And we're going to start right with the Pittsburgh Steelers, an uncharacteristically busy free agency trade. They got Jalen Ramsey. They got DK Metcalf. They went out and got Aaron Rodgers. This is uncharacteristic. Pittsburgh usually plays everything close to the vest and depends on a lot of development. Well, I'm going to let Chris Carter tell you what's going on in camp with the Steelers.
Hey, everyone. Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast with your daily Steelers training camp update after day 6 here at St. Vincent College. It was another big day for the defense for the most part, but the offense did win 7 shots. It went down to the final wire. It's 3-3. The first team went back out there, and Aaron Rodgers threw a great pass with great pass protection on a cornerback blitz by the Steelers offensive line, and then a beautiful toe-tapping reception from DK Metcalf. He looked really solid. But then after that, the defense dominated a lot of the 11-on-11 periods after that. You saw the run defense especially winning. Backs on backers. Biggest winner, Peyton Wilson, looked dominant. The Peyton Wilson, Patrick Queen, Cole Holcomb, the linebackers winning a lot there. Caleb Johnson had a rough day, but hey, that's expected of a rookie against a really experienced defense. I'll say other big winners, Joey Porter Jr. continues to have a really strong camp, shaping himself up for a really good third season in the NFL. I'd say also looking at the defensive line, Y.A. Black turned some heads. We'll talk more about that on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. We'll see you there.
Pittsburgh is in a real good spot. And what I mean by that, even if this doesn't work, they're loaded up with draft picks next year. Their cap situation will be good. They got a lot of good players, man, but it's hard for me to get over the hump that the guy that I've seen playing quarterback named Aaron Rodgers the last 2.5 years is going to revert back to the dude I saw 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think easily one of the most fascinating stories in the NFL this year, because Mike Tomlin has this way of always getting, squeezing every last drop out of a team, even when they're not very talented. I mean, he was winning. He had a winning record with Duck Hodges playing quarterback for a stretch of a season several years ago. Like, it's remarkable the way he's able to do this. But what I think is interesting with Aaron Rodgers is, like, this could be the thing, because I know Pittsburgh fans are pretty vocal at times about wanting to move on from Mike Tomlin, and maybe he's run his course and all these things. Like, Aaron Rodgers could be the thing that either gets him over this hump where he's had all these playoff losses and it's like, okay, clearly the guy's great and he deserves a lifetime contract. Or if this is the first time they have a losing season because Aaron Rodgers just really is washed, then maybe it opens the door on the team finally being willing to part ways with him, which I think is so interesting. And they're approaching it like it's going to be the former. They're approaching it like it's going to be a Super Bowl season. You don't go get Jalen Ramsey, go get Aaron Rodgers. You don't make the moves that they made, DK Metcalf, if you don't think that you have a chance to legitimately compete for a championship and make a deep playoff run. So I don't know. The Steelers are in a weird spot. You're right. I think there's some positive signs on the other side. But I also think, like, their inability, because they know Aaron Rodgers is a one-year thing, and their inability to just kind of accept, hey, let's be bad for a year, or let's do what we need to do to get up in the draft and actually find ourselves a quarterback. And the fact that they took Kenny Pickett a couple years ago, I think has really set them back at that position specifically. And until they figure that out, I don't know how serious I could take them as like legitimate Super Bowl contenders like they used to be back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, man. The reason why I got a little bit of trepidation is what you just mentioned. But then on the other side, I love the team building aspect. They have really invested in their front seven. They have really invested well in their offensive line. They have invested in tight ends. It's abnormal for me to talk about them not investing well in skill positions because they were the team that kept losing Santonio Holmes. They lost Plaxico Burress. They used to let guys go because they knew that they could fill those holes. Le'Veon Bell, they can't do that anymore. They have to go out now and get skill position players from other teams. And now the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, the Bengals. This is the last team that we're going to talk about because they were the team that really, believe it or not, made the most noise this offseason. But it wasn't because of who they acquired. It's because of who they went and got that they didn't want to pay. And they failed to keep one of their guys under contract and Trey Hendrickson. Now, Hendrickson has shown up to camp. Shamar Stewart has finally signed, but is the damage done? He's in camp, but he ain't got no money, Hendrickson. Listen to the guys from Locked On Bengals talk about that.
But Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show talking about the progress essentially that's been made with the Trey Hendrickson deal, saying that they're essentially in line on years, on money, overall money, but there is a bit of a gulf on guarantees. It does sound like the Bengals may have gotten some guaranteed money into their offer for year 2 of the deal, but not enough for what Trey Hendrickson is looking for, as he's looking for multiple years of assurances and guaranteed money in the deal.
Look, I know you ain't supposed to play guys when they're 30. And Terry McLaurin's going through this in Washington. But I do believe when you've been a bad organization and you have people like that on your team and in your locker room that personify professionalism and class, at some point you have to reward them. And you have to reward them as an incentive for those young players to be just like them. This is how you get paid. At some point, you got to step outside of that box, man, and do something that you're not supposed to do. And the Bengals don't seem like they know that.
Yeah, you asked the question at the top of this Bengals conversation, like, is the damage already done? I think it is. Like, they might get this worked out with Trey Hendrickson. They might get he showed up to camp. He's going to be here this year, it seems like, as long as they figure out the final sort of parameters of whatever this contract's going to look like. But I think other players around the league are seeing a team that's like, hey, they're kind of unwilling to pay guys. You know what I mean? Like, I know they paid Jamar Chase. I know they paid T. Higgins. I know they paid Joe Burrow, but I think a lot of that's centered around, hey, we need to keep Joe Burrow happy. He's our franchise quarterback. We're going to sort of invest in the offense here. But what they've done with Trey Hendrickson, and I honestly thought it was unwise to maybe bring back both T. Higgins and Jamar. Like, I think you pay Jamar Chase. Obviously, he's one of the best.
Obviously, yeah.
But I think, like, paying T and not maybe trying to find a younger option at wide receiver was probably the route that I would have gone through the draft. And then that maybe saved you the money you would have needed to get this to the finish line with Trey Hendrickson a while ago. The Shamar Stewart situation, which I think was more about just like the language in the contract more than the actual finances of it. But the Bengals are very well documented. And listen, it feels like they're kind of going into this year. I guess now that Trey Hendrickson's back, you have a little bit more optimism about their defense. But it kind of feels like similar to last year. They think they can just win football games with like this explosive offense and a defense that might have some trouble stopping people. And I don't know that that's going to be the case. Again, Trey Hendrickson being back is a nice a positive for them. We know how great he is. He was the sack leader last year. So if he plays at that level, you know, that changes some of the dynamics of things, and they could obviously be a playoff team or in that mix again. But the other part of this too for them is like they got to get off to faster starts. Pretty much every year of Zach Taylor's tenure, they've gotten off to at least an 0-2 start. And I think last year it was 0-3. So, yeah, that's been an issue for them. They cannot fall behind the 8 ball. And interesting enough, they actually play the Browns week 1. And that Browns team has kind of been a bit of a bugaboo for them at times. Kevin Stefanski seems to have Zach Taylor's number over the years. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, the Bengals are they're a weird team because they're obviously super talented. They have a franchise quarterback, but you also don't necessarily think they are the biggest threat to the only reason you think they're a threat is because they have Joe Burrow. And I think we saw last year that like he can't do it all by himself.
Yeah, I think their slow starts has something to do with the way they structure training camp. That's my opinion on that. The other part of it is paying Jamar Chase is a no-brainer. They probably thought, okay, well, Philly paid both of their receivers. I got a news flash for you. Philly also has a whole bunch of defensive players on rookie contracts because they draft well. And you guys haven't drafted well. And they also have Coach Stoutland in one of the best offensive lines in the league. You don't have that. So you can't do what great teams do unless you emulate great teams in other areas that you don't see. And finally, them paying Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, it's a no-brainer to this effect. If you're a single man and you deliver a pizza to Sydney Sweeney's house and she says, I'm lonely, you want to come in and drink a glass of wine? Of course you going in there to drink a glass of wine. What are you talking about? Sydney, well, don't threaten me with a good time. That's what it's like giving Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. I had to take my glasses off right there, man, to make that thing more clear.
She going to be wearing those jeans she was advertising for?
She can have on an Eskimo suit and she invites me in there, Jack. It's going to be some fun going on. But listen, let me tell you this. You mentioned something about Tomlin. People want him gone. Some of them. Because I think the word I'm looking for here is stale. Not that he's not a good coach, but it's just gotten stale, kind of puerile-ish, where the message just isn't coming through anymore. You need to be careful what you wish for.
I agree.
There's a coach named Sean Payton that I know New Orleans wish they had back. We're going to talk about Payton's team now, Denver, and the New Orleans Saints, as we kind of compare their quarterback situation to the Cleveland Browns situation. And then I'm going to ask Spencer to tell me something about Travis Hunter, like that trade and how that trade is being received up in Cleveland. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, man, the show today is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. It's more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center, and you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I'll tell you right now, I was paying for one prescription 3 different times through 2 different streaming services and that place directly. I found out when I was logging in, so Monarch Money helped me clean that up. You can do the same by taking control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Rolling through third and final segment of the Barbershop here on Locked On NFL. My guest of the day is Locked On Browns host Spencer German, someone y'all know very well. He ain't know y'all, but he know you now. He know how we roll here. All right, let's get to it. Sean Payton has done a hell of a job. I'm going to be transparent every time I can and tell you, I thought Sean Payton's going to get himself fired drafting Bo Nix. I saw their draft last year. I'm like, what are they doing? I saw what they did in free agency. And you know what they were doing? They were doing like the Buffalo Bills. They were getting people that were perfect for them. And they now look like a very, very good, sound team. Last year, their big wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy, actually did go to Cleveland and have the best year of his career. Well, the Broncos didn't let that happen this year. They retained their really good player in Courtland Sutton. Check out the boys from Locked On Broncos.
The Denver Broncos contract extension with Courtland Sutton is even better than you think. The Broncos signed Courtland Sutton to a 4-year, $92 million deal worth $41 million in guaranteed money. Massive contract and a well-deserved payday for Courtland Sutton. But interestingly enough, this deal was almost a copy and paste of the deal signed last year by Calvin Ridley, a free agent wide receiver who ended up signing with the Tennessee Titans. Calvin Ridley got almost an identical deal, 4 years, $92 million, but the devil is in the details. Both contracts are worth $23 million in average annual value, except for Courtland Sutton's is currently priced out at 8.2% of the NFL salary cap, and that will obviously decrease as time goes along. And when Calvin Ridley signed his deal, it was worth over 9% of the salary cap. Not to mention, Ridley got nearly $47 million in total guaranteed money, whereas Sutton got $41 million in guaranteed money. So the Denver Broncos getting their guy at a steal, a more productive receiver, a younger receiver, and a better player for a lower price. Can't beat it. Well done, George Payton and the front office of the Denver Broncos.
Courtland Sutton was my comp for Tedoroy McMillan, who's running around in Carolina right now, right? You can't put your finger on why they're so good, but they're big, they're strong, they're able to get open even though they're not super, super fast. I like this for Sean Payton, and I think he's the type of person that personifies exactly what Sean Payton wants to do.
Yeah, I really like Courtland Sutton. I think this is smart by the Broncos to retain a receiver after obviously letting Jerry Jeudy walk last year. What's interesting is as he kind of laid out the contract details, I was kind of confirming this, but like the Browns last year, everyone thought they were crazy when they traded for Jerry, and then they gave him an extension. They gave him 3 years, and they got. But here's the thing: like everyone was like freaking out because they said, "Well, hey, why give this guy an extension before he's even played it down?" If you look at the details of that contract, it was a 3-year, $52 million extension. They basically got that guy on a steal of like $17.5 million, which is less than what Courtland Sutton's making with this deal that he just signed with the Broncos. So, and he obviously performed up to a very, very high level last year. I was banging my know in our group chat here on Locked On that Jerry should have been a top 100 player. Voted on by all of our hosts. I know, Tony, I know you got a couple guys snubbed off of your list too. So Brian Thomas, I brought up Brian Thomas on my show in talking about Jerry Jeudy. So we both sort of felt the pain there. But yeah, I think the Broncos are in a pretty good place overall. I'm with you on when they drafted Bo Nix, I was a little skeptical, but Sean Payton, I think after that first year in Denver with Russell Wilson, where it was a little shaky and you didn't really know if he still had it, you know, he brought this thing full circle and proved like he is still that offensive quarterback whisperer guru that everyone thinks he is. And so I think they're heading in the right direction. Smart of them to lock up Courtland Sutton. But I do wonder a little bit if they wish they still had Jerry Jeudy, because I think the season he had last year proved that there's a really, really good player there.
Yeah, it is a really good player. Peyton has had success with a player like this before. And that was Marquise Colston, a guy that just knows how to use his body, use his physicality. Now, the team that Sean Payton left, my man Ross Jackson is down there trying to sell us on Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck being the quarterback, taking first team reps with their new staff. Ross walks to the car every day, gives us a little bit of report from New Orleans. He's going to do it again today. Check out Ross Jackson.
All right, welcome to your car. I'll tell you everything you need to know about Saints practice day 6. It's a short walk to the car. It was also a short practice. It was more of a walkthrough than it was a practice. See, we're already here. Wasn't that nice? It was a short day, short walkthrough for the team as well, but still some good work and still some things that I would take away from it that I thought were really interesting. It was a Spencer Rattler heavy day, but I don't know that that's going to factor into the rotation of quarterbacks for the remainder of the week. So it's probably more like a gearing up for, is kind of how Kellen Moore explained it, gearing up for more of the up-tempo kind of situational work that's on the way, and so easier to do it in a walkthrough first and then implement it on the field. But just the intentionality of Kellen Moore to go first day of practice, and his staff, right? It's a collaborative effort like he talked about, but to go first day of padded practice and then follow that up with a day of walkthrough, basically everything but practice, right? So we have a little bit of a lighter day.
All right, so what I juxtapose and what I'm able to extract from what Ross is saying there is there's a new day. Kind of the way you said Cleveland is kind of setting themselves up for the future. New Orleans is doing it with a new staff, and Kellen Moore seems like the things that he's doing, he is setting them up for the future. He's laying the foundation for what he wants this program to be. And I think that's what you have to do, because it ain't like you can just drive down on Bourbon Street and find a quarterback. You have to do all of the things that are necessary to prepare yourself for when that quarterback does finally show up at your doorstep. And I think Kellen Moore's doing a good job.
Yeah, listen, I like what Kellen Moore's doing. I think he's a good fit down there. It's funny, like the Browns and Saints have gotten talked about pretty, you know, they're sort of parallel to each other in the way people talk about them as teams that are both going to be bad this year. They have some of the best odds for being the number 1 overall pick in 2026, which I find kind of interesting, honestly, because like I think PFF released that somebody did like their ranked all the rosters 1 to 32, and the Browns were somehow 32 on there, and I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, how does a roster that has Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett and Joel Bitonio and Jerry Jeudy, how is that roster the 37? I know that the Browns were bad last year. I get it. I said that at the top of the show. When you only win 3 games, you're not going to get a lot of respect around the league. So I understand where it comes from. But this roster is there's no chance this roster is 32nd in the league. And one of the teams I brought up when I had a conversation about that was the Saints, because I said, listen, no disrespect to Ross Jackson. He does a tremendous job covering the team, but that roster's bad. And their quarterback situation, I think, is worse than Cleveland's, if for nothing else, because that they just have no experience. There's a lot of inexperience in that room. It's Spencer Rattler, who has 1 year in the league. It's Tyler Shuck, who we know is a rookie. It's Jake Hayner, who I know he's been in the league a little bit, but like I don't know his stats offhand. I don't know what he's done in this league. So it's not anybody that you're really looking at and you're like, hey, this group has a lot of talent and a lot of guys that really have proven anything and done anything. And I get it. You shouldn't throw stones at glass houses. Like, our quarterback situation here in Cleveland isn't great either, but you kind of know what to expect with Joe Flacco. Kenny Pickett, while some would call him a first-round bust, which I think is maybe fair, he does have a resume that shows like, hey, he's won some games in the fourth quarter. He's done some things in this league that you can maybe lean on. And then you have these two rookies that people are excited to see at least like what they bring to the table. But I just, again, I was shocked that people sort of this way about the Browns roster and were confident of the Saints as being worse, because I just don't see it. Speaking of Kenny Pickett, by the way, I talked to Ross earlier in the offseason. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if there's an odd man out in the Browns quarterback room and it ends up being Kenny Pickett, I think the Saints make some sense. The Kellen Moore connection. He was with Philly last year, and Ross said the exact same thing to me. So if they're looking for a quarterback that maybe adds some experience into their room, I'm just saying, Kenny Pickett might be able to be had at the end of August here.
Trying to get more compensation. You already got enough from the Jaguars, man. You got enough. You got 90 seconds to give me your assessment of the Travis Hunter deal. I'm glad the Jaguars got Travis Hunter because it gives them someone. Very, very rarely can you add talent and it automatically goes to the very top alongside Brian Thomas Jr. and a few other people of your team to really help you. Cleveland, on the other hand, went for some infrastructure. I don't think the Jaguars are going to take Mason Graham anyway, but tell me what is the temperature set for Travis Hunter not being a Brown?
I really like Travis Hunter coming out. There was a stretch there where we thought that was the for sure pick for Andrew Berry. Like, he was talking of Travis Hunter every press conference he had, every time he met with the media. We were all kind of convinced. We all had our Travis Hunter stories written going into the draft night because we thought it was going to be the pick. And then they sort of pulled the carpet out from underneath us. I think in the moment, fans were a little bit shocked because we all felt, again, everyone around this team felt like it was going to be Travis Hunter. But I also understand what they did and why they did it. Like, they knew they needed more than a great player that can play both ways to fix this team. It didn't really make sense for them to draft a guy who theoretically was going to play primarily wide receiver for them when they don't really have a quarterback that was worth a damn to throw him the football. So they prioritize getting the draft capital for. And on top of that, you have a great defensive tackle that they think is going to dominate for them alongside Myles Garrett. So I understand the thought process. I do think what's fascinating from here on out, though, Tony, is how Mason Graham and Travis Hunter will be linked forever, at least here in Cleveland. And if Travis Hunter goes on to be a Hall of Famer and Mason Graham is just like a good defensive lineman, I think people will forever point and say Andrew Berry messed this one up.
Yeah, they're going to say that, especially since the Jaguars drafted Trayvon Walker. In the last 2 years, he has 20 and a half sacks, and people still think he's a bust. That's wild.
That's wild. That's
wild to me.
He's great.
And he's one of the best in the league against the run, and other coaches brag about how violent he is. But fans seem to think that just because Aiden Hutchinson was on the watch list for Defensive Player of the Year, that somehow the Jaguars really, really, really screwed up, and that's not the case. All right, man, if you don't want to mess up things, make sure you go to Locked On Bets and make it your second listen. Locked On Bets is where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rodgers, they have daily locks, right? And can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Spencer German, first time, but it won't be the last time. Thanks for coming to the barbershop. We appreciate you. And you guys make sure you check him out at Locked On Browns and check me out at Locked On Jaguars. And Tyler Rowland, early in the morning, the madman will hit you like a double shot of espresso and wake you up on Locked On NFL AM. Until the next time, you guys take care. We'll see you later.